Hi guys, and welcome back to our social studies lesson. We're going to be focusing today on the different forms of history and how we use those history sources to analyze and learn about things from the past. So we're going to get started on reviewing that PowerPoint presentation we've been going over the past few days about Ghana, Mali, and Sangay. And if you look at my screen here, this is just kind of a review of what we've learned about with our Western African empires. We learned about how each one of them rose to power, how each one of them declined in power, and how they were really looking for control over the salt and gold mines. Now we're going to switch gears a little bit, and on the back of, let me see here, on the back of this sheet of paper, I'm borrowing Christopher's for a second. So you have this sheet that you guys were working on for Ghana, Mali, and Sangay. Make sure you have this out, and Chris has his attached paper to it because he didn't have this sheet at first. So if you have your attached paper, you can get that out. But on the back side of it, you're going to see evaluating different types of historical evidence. And there's 3 different types of historical evidence that we're going to be reviewing today. We're going to be learning about archaeology, written history, and oral history, and how using each one of these types of histories, there's strengths and weaknesses to both, and how using them will help us learn about the past. And it told us how historians were able to learn all this information about the African empires in Ghana, Mali, and Sangay. Not enough coffee yet this morning, guys, so I'm still drinking my coffee. A little tired here, okay? All right, so once you have that sheet out, we're going to dig into how we know about the history of West Africa. Well, the first type of historical evidence that historians used to learn about Africa was archaeology. Archaeological evidence. That is actual pieces of history that has been either discovered being buried into the ground, being dug up. And I know our guest teacher has done some work recently with digging up some cool archaeological evidence, which you can ask her about at the end of this video. Her and her family were working on that at my grandma's property, which is pretty cool. So make sure you ask her about that at the end of this video though. But archaeological evidence is stuff that's from the past that was either lost or buried and discovered by historians years later. So looking at this piece of archaeological evidence, you have this guy on a horse, okay? And anyone might think that that's just a statue, but if we look down at it and we look at what this means, we can take clues from the past and help us learn more about these different societies. So starting off with what it is, it's a wooden sculpture of a horse and a rider. We notice by looking at this image, the rider is wearing a tight cap, a tight-fitting hat, a large necklace, has short pants on, and has 2 weapons. He has a short bow in his hand, and he has a dagger. So we also know that the horse is unrealistic looking. It has like a tube head and legs, and archaeologists don't know why the figure looks so realistic, but the horse doesn't. That's a little unusual. By looking at this, historians are thinking that the rider was made larger to show that there's power and importance of the rider over the horse, and that's showing that the rider was probably a warrior. Scrolling down a little bit more here, archaeological evidence like this can help us understand that soldiers may have worn these types of outfits and wore these kind of weapons when they went into battle. They also were a little unclear on what the sculpture was used for. If you look at it, it has a little mushroom base right here that the sculpture is on. So historians are thinking that this may have been like a base to go on top of a long pole for like maybe a ceremony or a political event, because they're thinking that this may have kind of been like a cap eraser where you can put this on top of a long pole. So this is one of the cool things about archaeological evidence, is that it actually allows us to see something from the past and to know that individuals during this time period were actually using this device and this item, and now we have it to use. It's pretty interesting. So that's our first type of history, is historical evidence, is archaeology. The next is written history. Now, written history is anything that's written down, either on paper or on walls. Anything that's written down for us to read is written history. So here's an example of some written history from the African Empire age. It says, the king adorns himself like a woman, wearing necklaces around his neck and bracelets on his forearms, and he puts on a high cap decorated with gold and wrapped in a turban of fine cotton. He holds an audience in a domed pavilion around which stands 10 horses covered with gold embroidered materials. At the door of the pavilion are dogs of excellent pedigree. Around their necks they wear collars of gold and silver, studded with a number of balls of the same metals. So this was actually a early Muslim geographer that wrote this while visiting some of the empires in West Africa. And so sorry, guys. As he was visiting these West African empires, he realized that these kings and these cultures were so extravagant, so rich in gold and money and influence and wealth and power, and he wrote about this. So historians, looking back, this tells us what that was looking like, what their daily setup would consist of. Okay. And then oral history is anyone telling a story. So, for example, my family has this story that has been passed down for years about something that my grandma did that was funny. And so every generation that tells that story, okay, that's an oral history. I don't have it to read out of, but I remember the story and I'm sharing it with my son. Okay, that's oral history. And what that tells a historian is that it gives them information on the important parts of the story. Okay. So now, using your sheet that you have in front of you, okay, you should have this. I would like you to write down the strengths and weaknesses of each one of the types of historical evidence. So the strengths for archaeology is that we can examine real objects from the past. Weaknesses are that we can look at artifacts that are not often complete and have pieces missing. So that horse, for example, what if it was missing something like we thought it goes on top of a pole, maybe that pole was missing, we don't know what that's actually used for. Okay. Written history, the strengths is that we have actual words written in the past. Okay. And then the weakness is that people's point of views can affect how they view and write about another culture. So there was that geographer that wrote about the king and his horses. And what that did is it maybe just was his point of view and wasn't the actual truth. So that's one of the weaknesses of written history. Oral history, a strength is that historians try to choose the most important parts of the history to remember. And the weaknesses is that things can be exaggerated and changed over time as stories are being told. So those are just some of the strengths and weaknesses of different types of historical evidence. So the guest teacher can pause this video for you to write this down if you need to. I'm going to have you guys take a African quiz tomorrow during your at-home learning days on Canvas. It's called African Quiz. I think it's 10 questions roughly, and you're going to have questions on each one of the empires of Ghana, Mali, Sangay, and you're going to have questions on the strengths and weaknesses of different types of historical evidence. Now, I want you to know that you are allowed to use this note sheet when you're taking your quiz at home tomorrow. I want you to use this. That's why I've been having you write all this down. I want you to use this resource to help you while you're learning and taking this exam. All right, that's it for social studies today, guys. Good luck, and I'll see you later.